This video is about the reading strategy of highlighting and annotating. In an earlier video, you learned about active reading, and the 3 steps to active reading are pre-reading, reading, and reviewing. You also learned that during the reading phase, you should be highlighting and taking notes from what you read. But exactly what are you supposed to highlight, and what notes are you supposed to take? Let's start with highlighting. Highlighting basically means emphasizing. If something is highlighted, it means that it is showcased or set apart in a way that emphasizes it, makes it more noticeable or more obvious. That same concept applies to highlighting your reading. You want to highlight the things that you want to emphasize, that you want to look back at later. To start with, you should always highlight the main idea. A part of a sentence, a paragraph, or a page, or a complete article that tells you what that text is all about. You also want to highlight certain words within the document. You might want to highlight words whose definition you don't know that you need to look up later. And you should highlight technical terms, jargon that's specific to your field, or vocabulary words that are defined within the document. You should also highlight anything that makes you question or be confused about what it is you're reading, anything that you need to look at again later to better understand it. And you should highlight sections of a document that really helped you understand what that document is about, something that helped you clarify what it is the document's describing. When we talk about annotating, we're referring to taking notes, writing notes in the margin, marking up your text with underlines, notes, question marks, asterisks, whatever is comfortable for you. And so what notes should you take? What mark should you make? Let's look at a few ways that you can annotate your text. To start off with, it's always a good idea to summarize what's going on. If you read an important paragraph that was full of lots of important information, you should summarize it briefly in your own words. When I read textbooks, I always, at the bottom of the page, write a 1 or 2 sentence summary that explains what the page is about. Or at the top of the page, I might just write a 1 word that captures the topic of the page. That way, when I review that text later, I can just look at my notes to find a specific piece of information I'm looking for, instead of having to reread the entire document. You should also write down definitions to any words that you didn't know the meaning of. If you have to take the time to look a word up in a glossary or a dictionary, if you write the definition of it there right in your notes, when you go to review this, you'll have the definition right there within easy reach. You should also write down or notate anything that makes you confused or that you don't understand. You can put a question mark next to it, you can put a star next to it, but this is a good indicator of something that you need to look into more deeply later or ask about during class. You can also write down questions within your notes. Anything that you want to further explore that you didn't understand, that makes you think of just another question that's worth exploring, those are good things to write down too. Within your notes, you can also write down your own opinion. If you read something and it makes you have a strong reaction, whether that's an emotional reflection or a judgment on what's being discussed, you should include that in your annotations. You can also write down anything that you disagree with. If you're reading an article on a controversial topic and you think the author is wrong, you can write that in your notes too. That might help with a response to that particular article later. You can also note anything that is worth investigating further. Perhaps you're reading an article on one topic for class, but you read something that's really interesting that you want to find out more about or ask your teacher about. You should notate that as well. So let's look at an example of a paragraph that we will read together first, and then we will look at an example of the way that this particular paragraph was highlighted and annotated. So here's the paragraph. On July 16, 1969, the Apollo 11 spacecraft launched from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Its mission was to go where no human being had gone before, the moon. The crew consisted of Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin. The spacecraft landed on the moon in the Sea of Tranquility, a basaltic floodplain, on July 20th, 1969. The moonwalk took place the following day. On July 21st, 1969, at precisely 10:56, Commander Neil Armstrong emerged from the lunar module and took his famous first step onto the moon's surface. He declared, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." It was a monumental moment in human history. Now that we've read the paragraph, let's look at an example of how somebody might highlight and annotate this. As you can see, we have a couple different notations as well as some highlighting and one underlined word. So here the highlights are July 16th, 1969, which is the date that the spacecraft launched from Kennedy Space Center. So obviously that's an important date somebody wants to remember. We also have the moon. So again, this is an example of a highlight that's just looking for important information. What was this particular space mission about? We have the crew members highlighted as well. Again, more important information, where they landed. And then we have that Commander Neil Armstrong emerged from the lunar module and took his famous first step. So all of our highlights in this example are getting the most important details out of this particular paragraph. Our notations are giving us a little bit more information in terms of what the reader is personally getting out of this particular paragraph. So the first one is about the Apollo 11, and our note says, what were the other 10 Apollo missions for? Were there other failed attempts at reaching the moon? So this is something that this reader wants to investigate further. A piece of information within this particular paragraph has sparked this curiosity within the reader. Our next notation is with this underlined word basaltic. And here we have the definition. A basaltic floodplain is a section of ground covered in lava from a volcanic eruption. So this is an example where a reader didn't know what a word meant and took the time to look up the definition and write it down. Finally, we have a last notation at the end. It was a monumental moment in human history, and the reader wrote, "Why was space travel so important?" This is a question. Something within the paragraph made the reader question this, and the reader wrote it down as an initial reaction or maybe something to look into further. This is just an example of what highlighting and annotating will look like. Again, the important thing to remember is that you should be highlighting what you see as the most important information in the text that you want to be able to review and quickly identify as something that was important. Your annotations, your notes in the text should be things that you need further clarification on, that really spoke to you, that helped clarify, that you didn't understand, that you question, or that you have an opinion about. All of these things together, when you go to review your document, will help you find specific pieces of information that you may need to recapture or use in another way. Doing this process also helps you better understand and remember what it is that you were reading because you're interacting with the text as you read.